Welcome to the Friedreich Ataxia Research Update. I'm Julie Greenfield and I'm the Head of Research at Ataxia UK. I'll talk a little bit about Ataxia UK and the activities we do to promote research. I'll then talk about developments in new treatments, followed by some developments in symptomatic relief treatments, and lastly talk about some opportunities for you to take part in research. So what does Ataxia UK do to promote research? We have a research strategy that says that we aim to maximise the impact of research in improving diagnosis and developing treatments that are available to patients. And we do this by funding a wide range of research projects in laboratories around the world, and we work as the link between researchers and the ataxia community. And we were very pleased in our latest impact report that we found that for every pound that Ataxia UK invested, it generated £4 in further ataxia research. So we were delighted with that figure. We work very much in collaboration with researchers, with pharma companies, with other charities, and at the centre of everything we do, we always have people with ataxia, and we engage and work closely with people with ataxia to try and get their involvement in the research process. We also organise conferences and workshops, so our largest international event that we organised was in November 2019, when we organised the International Ataxia Research Conference together with our collaborators, other charities, and we're now planning the next one for 2022 in collaboration again. So talking about Friedreich's ataxia, the aim in FA research. We know that we have a mistake in the frataxin gene which causes the Friedreich's ataxia. That leads to a reduction in the frataxin protein, and that leads to a number of disruption in processes within the cells, such as oxidative stress. You get an increase in iron in the mitochondria, which are the parts of the cell which are responsible for producing energy for the cell, and you get cell damage. And by knowing all this pathway, we know where to intervene. So you can intervene by gene therapy, by increasing the reading of the frataxin gene. You can intervene by increasing the amount of the frataxin protein by a number of different ways, and you can also intervene by targeting the disruption of these various cellular processes. And all these types of therapies are being developed around the world. Approaches and targeting specifically the root of the problem, the mistake in the frataxin. So you can use gene therapy in FA. And gene therapy means where you're replacing or repairing the gene that causes the condition. We know that there are a number of companies around the world who are in early stages of developing gene therapy for Friedreich's ataxia, and you can see on the slide a number of these companies listed. And their approach is to use a virus as a vehicle to deliver a functional version of the frataxin gene to the central nervous system, to the brain. And they're all currently in preclinical development, meaning they're not actually trialling in people with Friedreich's ataxia just yet. And there are also a number of academic groups around the world working and developing gene therapy approaches in Friedreich's ataxia. One such group is in Spain, and Ataxia UK is funding a project there in developing a way in which to correct the FA gene can be delivered to the central nervous system using a viral transporter. And the team are there currently studying how this virus distributes in the body using animal models of Friedreich's ataxia. So the good news is that there are gene therapy treatments that have been approved in other conditions. So one example from 2019 was that gene therapy was approved for the spinal muscular atrophy, which is another rare neurological condition, and it is now actually available on the NHS. Similarly, another kind of gene silencing treatment was approved by regulators in Europe, the EMA, to treat a form of hereditary amyloidosis. And so this is really promising because we're actually getting gene therapy approaches being made into treatments available for patients. So we're really hoping that similar things can happen for Friedreich's ataxia in the future. Now moving on to developments in treatments where you're trying to increase the frataxin protein. We've spoken about the gene therapy approaches up till now. Now let's look at the developments in increasing frataxin protein. So there are a number of drug treatments to increase the frataxin protein, and a number of preclinical studies are being carried out to identify drugs that can actually increase the levels of frataxin protein. And I will give a few examples here. One example is an existing drug called interferon gamma, that was shown to increase frataxin in a number of different cell types in a mouse model of Friedreich's. Another example is dimethyl fumarate, which is a drug used in multiple sclerosis, which also is found to increase frataxin in cell and mouse models. And indeed, in people with MS, they found that taking the drug, their levels of frataxin increased. There are other approaches. So Ataxia UK, for example, is just funding a team in France to test a large number of chemical compounds and try and identify those which could function in the place of frataxin, so a kind of replacement of the frataxin function, and also those drugs that could enhance the activity of frataxin. So these are other approaches to try and find drugs that could then eventually be tested in human trials. And moving on trials, there are a number of drugs that are at the clinical trial stage being tested in people with Friedreich's ataxia around the world. And the first one I wanted to talk to you about is the frataxin replacement therapy. So a company called Larimar Therapeutics are currently investigating a drug which is in phase 1 clinical trial, and they're expecting results in 2021. And this drug helps to deliver frataxin to the mitochondria, which is where the frataxin is found within the cells. And this particular drug has been granted rare pediatric disease designation, meaning it could be fast-tracked. So if the trial is positive, the treatment could be fast-tracked in development of treatment for the condition. Another example of a drug that is in the clinical trial stage and it increases frataxin levels is exenatide. And exenatide is a drug that was developed for the treatment of type 2 diabetes, and it was shown to increase frataxin in mouse models and in cells of people with FA. And then a small clinical trial took place in Belgium with 16 participants, and they found that in 5 weeks this exenatide treatment increased the frataxin expression within the cells of people with FA. This was a very small study and it wasn't looking at the efficacy in improving the ataxia, so larger studies are needed to see whether it actually improves symptoms of FA. Is in etravirine. Now, etravirine is an antiviral drug that's used to treat HIV, and it was also shown to increase frataxin in cells derived from patients. And now this is in a phase 2 clinical trial in Italy to study if it's safe and if its efficacy in people with FA. Ataxia UK is funding a project with the same team in Italy to test drugs that might have a similar structural function to etravirine and try and develop new drugs as well. So having spoken about drugs and approaches to increase frataxin protein, the last part that I'd like to talk to you about is development treatments that target these disrupted processes, such as the oxidative stress and the cell damage that you get within the mitochondria of cells of people with Friedreich's ataxia. And there's a few approaches being learned. So the first one is by Reata Pharmaceuticals, and it's the omaveloxolone trial, MOXIE trial. Now this drug targets oxidative stress and a particular pathway called the NRF2 signalling pathway that is affected in Friedreich's ataxia. And it's been a trial that's been ongoing in a number of countries around the world, including a trial in the UK in the London Ataxia Centre. There were 2 parts to it. The results of the first part, which had 69 people with Friedreich's ataxia, helped show that it was safe and helped define the dose to be used in the second part of the study. It also showed the activation of this NRF2 pathway that is affected in Friedreich's ataxia and improvement in the mitochondrial function in cells. So it looked like it was doing what they're expecting it to do. This particular trial was small and it was not designed, it was not powered to see any improvement in ataxia, although there were some benefits in a modified FARS and ataxia rating scale. The results of part 2, which involved 103 people with Friedreich's ataxia, involved people taking the drug over 48 weeks, and there was a statistically significant improvement in their symptoms associated with FA compared to people who were on the placebo trial. And the results of this, the top-line results of this, were announced by Reata towards the end of last year, and there was a lot of excitement. The next step was to discuss with the regulators, with the FDA in the US, to see whether the data provided was sufficient to get the drug approved as a treatment for Friedreich's ataxia. Now, unfortunately, the FDA came back saying that there was a need for another trial to take place to confirm these results. And as I understand, there are now discussions between Reata and the regulators, as Reata proposed maybe using some of the data that is already available from the extension phase of this one-year trial, because the trial continued with everybody on the drug. So hopefully they will be able to get more data to convince the regulators and to prove whether this treatment is a true positive treatment that could be used to treat people with Friedreich's ataxia. Then there are of approaches that are being used. So PTC Therapeutics has an antioxidant that they're looking that has shown some positive results in small phase 2 trials, and they're now starting a larger one in a number of countries in Europe. Minorix Therapeutics is a company that is testing a PPAR gamma activator in people with FA. This is what their drug does. And this PPAR gamma is a protein found in cells, and in Friedreich's it cannot function properly. So the idea is to activate it and see whether you get improvements in FA. And a phase 1 clinical trial showed that this drug was well tolerated in terms of the safety, and it was able to reach the brain, which is obviously where you need it to get to. And there's now a phase 2 trial ongoing in a number of European countries. And lastly, resveratrol, which is a naturally occurring compound found in the skin of grapes, and it potentially improves mitochondrial function. And this resveratrol is being trialled in FA in a trial in Australia. Looking at trying to develop treatments that might stop the progression or improve the condition in Friedreich's ataxia. There are also a number of approaches to provide symptomatic relief for a number of the associated problems, issues that people with Friedreich's have. Staff have slurred speech, and so we funded a speech therapy project which tried to provide a treatment to improve the speech. So the speech was assessed in the weeks before the therapy in terms of the volume, the speed, the intelligibility of the speech. And then this therapy treatment was provided over Skype, online, making it very easy for participants to participate. And then the speech was assessed again after weeks of therapy, using the same parameters, the volume, the speed, and the intelligibility. Patients were asked to complete questionnaires to see how they felt as well, or how their speech might have been improved. And the results showed that they were quite positive, and the participants had more breath available to speak, and this resulted in improvements in their voices which sounded less strained. So although the study did not show improvements in the abilities to other people to understand participants, it did show that most participants felt that they were clear and they had to repeat themselves less and were more confident. So it sounds like there were really positive things that came out of this study. So Professor Anya Lowett, who is a researcher who did this study, is now planning further studies, and they're suggesting that this particular treatment called LSVT should be considered by speech and language therapists who are treating people with ataxia, provided it's closely monitored. And if you're interested in knowing more about this, do contact Ataxia UK on our helpline. And there is also a breakout session at this annual conference this afternoon and on Saturday, so you can talk to Professor Lowett directly. Another project that we have been involved with has been a project called Physical Activity for People with Rare Neurological Conditions. And it was developed by researchers at UCL and Cardiff, together with other groups of researchers. And Ataxia UK was invited to be one of the patient representative groups. And the aim is to understand the level of physical activity among people with rare neurological conditions. And we were pleased that the ataxias were included in this project. And once this information was gathered in a number of surveys and different interviews and different qualitative research, the next step is to develop a self-management program to support physical activity in people with rare neurological conditions. And the researchers are now trying to get funding to do the second part of the project, which would hopefully result in quite a practical help to people with ataxia. And thank you to everybody who participated in the survey that we distributed some time ago now. So we've spoken about physical activities, about speech therapy. There are also potentially drug therapies that could help with improving the ataxia symptom. So not necessarily a treatment long term, but it could be a symptomatic relief. And the company Intrabio, who we've been working with for a while now, recently announced some positive results for their drug, acetylleucine, a modified version of acetylleucine, that was in a clinical trial in Niemann-Pick type C. This Niemann-Pick type C is a neurodegenerative condition which has ataxia as a symptom. And the drug targeted the ataxia symptom, and including it showed an improvement in the SCARA score as part of the trial. So they found that the ataxia improved in these patients. And they're carrying on the trial in other conditions such as ataxia telangiectasia and other neurodegenerative conditions. And the hope here is that if they're able to prove that this treatment could be effective in relieving the symptom of ataxia, it could be generalised to other ataxias as well, potentially including Friedreich's ataxia too. The last approach I wanted to mention was cerebellar transcranial direct current stimulation trial. So recent studies reported that applying a low electrical current to the scalp may alleviate symptoms of ataxia. And a group in Italy have produced these results, and we're now funding them to do a trial in Italy. It involves a range of ataxias, including Friedreich's ataxia, and we're hoping to get the initial results in early 2022. Similar techniques are also being carried out around the world, such as trials in Canada and Brazil. So this is another approach that may provide some symptom relief for the ataxia. And they're trying to see as well how long-term this might be, how long the treatment effect might last. So the last bit of this talk was to talk a little bit about some opportunities to take part in research, and we're focusing on people in the UK, although some of these initiatives might be relevant for outside the UK as well. The first one is the FA Global Patient Registry. So many charities such as Ataxia UK already have patient registries which we have used to recruit for trials and research studies. However, some time ago we all got together with other ataxia charities around the world to create the new international registry, the FA Global Patient Registry, which is a global effort of all these patient groups to work together and pool the information in one place so that it's a much more powerful resource for research. So why do we need patient registries? When researchers are developing new drugs, they need to understand the disease and they need to understand the experiences of patients. And by gathering this information in one place, we can get as much as possible from a larger number of patients so that this can be more useful for research purposes. We also need, in order to run clinical trials, we need to be able to find patients in different countries who are willing to be part of these trials. And so this registry was built to collect more information about FA directly from people with it, and to help match patients to studies that they may be interested in as well. So if you're interested in registering, the website is shown on the slide, and we also have the link from the Ataxia UK website. We'd be really grateful if more people registered. So far we have more than nearly 700 people with FA who have registered since November 2019, and they're from 40 different countries, so it really is a truly global effort. So please do register if you're interested. And just to sort of clarify that being a friend of Ataxia UK is a different thing from joining this FA Global Registry. So even if you are a friend of Ataxia UK, please do feel free to join the registry and help in the research effort. The second project that some people might be able to participate in is the EFAX project. So this is a multi-site European natural history study. And we have a site in the UK, in London, at the Ataxia Centre, which is still recruiting. And the idea is for patients with Friedreich's ataxia to attend annual meetings, annual visits at the clinic, and a number of pieces of information are gathered, such as ataxia rating scales. And the data generated from this large study in different European countries is being used currently to design clinical trials to test medications. The initial funding came from the EU, then patient groups via Euroataxia joined in providing some interim funding, and Ataxia UK was one of the groups that provided funding, and now there are pharma partners who are funding it, showing the importance of this kind of work also to the pharma partners who are trying to develop treatments for Friedreich's ataxia. So if you're interested in joining, the details are on our website, and you can contact Paola Giunti to take part. Lastly, there's the nicotinamide trial, which we have mentioned a number of times, and unfortunately it has been delayed. The start has been delayed. However, we do aim to recruit about 90 people to the nicotinamide trial in London alone when recruitment starts, and then there are a number of other sites around Europe, and so the sites will be at Imperial and UCL, again with Paola Giunti being one of the sites. So do look out on our website and magazine and newsletters for full information as to when the recruitment will start on this important study. We also have a number of healthcare surveys that we run every so often, and they're on our website. So we're doing one on COVID-19 and ataxia, and this is for people with ataxia that have either had or believe they have had COVID-19. We're working with Ataxia UK's medical advisors in the hope to learn more about the impact of COVID-19 on people with ataxia and be able to inform people with ataxia and their doctors as to the useful information that might come out of this survey. And another survey is one that's being run by Google in a project called Project Euphonia. And the Google AI for Social program contacted us, Ataxia UK, asking us if we would help facilitate collecting some speech samples from people with speech difficulties, so people with ataxia who have slurred speech and speech difficulties, in order to improve their voice recognition technology. So we're hoping that people might be interested in taking part in providing some speech samples so that the speech recognition technology could be adapted to help people with ataxia and dysarthria in the future. And just all the studies for which we're looking participants, both the surveys and the more interventional studies, will be on our website in the Taking Part in Research section of our website. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you do have any questions, my email address is here on the slides. Thank you.